Alrighty. So you want to play Japan and War in the Pacific Admirals Edition. This is part 2. We are going to discuss aircraft choices and aircraft R&D. So the first thing I would suggest is that you load up your scenario. Go to, play by email, or if you're playing Japan, do Allied Computer so you can actually pull all the data up on the first turn. You would go into scenario selection, pick whatever scenario you're playing, and load it. What you would do once you're in there is you'll save the game to a save slot, of course. Then go ahead and exit out. Once you exit out, you will go up, and then you will open up your tracker. Once you got tracker open, you'll load that turn if you haven't already preset it. And then you'll go to aircraft comparison. Of course, you pick Japan, and then there's two nations under Japan. One's Navy, one's Army. And then you'll go through. Now, this sounds really boring and really tedious, and it really is. But you'll open up a spreadsheet or your notes. I prefer a spreadsheet of some sort. I have Excel, so I use that. But you can use Google Docs, any type of spreadsheet. And you're going to go through and you're going to copy down all this data about the different aircraft. I start with fighters. I start with Navy over Army. And then you go through fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, level bombers. You go through every type of aircraft and you write down the stats for all of them. Now, you don't need every single individual stat. Like, you don't need, whether this has two 7.7 millimeters or it has a drop tank. You don't need everything unless you want to. But you need most of the stuff that's in this box here. You want to know if it's CV capable, if it's a float plane. You want to know what kind of bombs it carries. And most importantly, what engine you need to build it. Once you have that, then you will go in back to your spreadsheet. And you'll have something like this. Here's my spreadsheet for scenario 2 against my upcoming game against Helsin. You see down at the bottom, I have the different types of aircraft. Let's go over to fighters. Across the top, I have the basics: name, availability, when it comes to available, normal, speed, cruising speed, endurance, all the stats that I feel are important. As you can see, I don't have anything about what type of guns that they have. But I do put down what tracker compiles as a gun value. Now, this value can be very misleading. Basically, what they do, they take the weapon on the aircraft, its position, do some math, and come up with a value. Normally, the higher the value, the more deadly the aircraft is in air-to-air combat. But there is a caveat to that. Like the Zero here, probably one of the most famous planes of World War II. It has a 12 gun value. That's pretty good for starting plane. You see the Claude only has a 4. Basically what that is, the Zero has, of course, the 7.7 millimeter crappy guns, then has the 250 cals basically on the nose. But what it is, compare that to where's the George at? The George here has a 22 gun value. Those are not the same values. Well, of course, one's 12, one's 22, but basically what it is, the Zero's guns are designed to kill other fighters. They fire, they have high, they shoot a lot of bullets, they're designed, for dogfighting. The George, if I remember correctly, if not, then look at the Tony and so forth, they have a lot of cannons. Cannons shoot a lot slower rate of fire, but they're bigger and they do more damage. They're designed to bring down the bombers, your B-17, which is why in the early game you rarely see a Zero or a Claude or a Nate bring down a B-17. It just doesn't happen. They just don't have enough firepower. Where in later game, the Georges, the Tonys, possibly the Franks will bring down bombers. I won't say easy because of course they're against better bombers, but N1K5J George will make mincemeat of a basic B-17 just because its cannons are much more powerful. So you do have to know a little bit of that, of which ones are interceptors and which ones are designed to kill which ones are designed to fight fighters, which ones are designed to fight bombers. So when you're going through your list after you've made all your, after you've made this chart, and you need this chart for each scenario, because scenario 1 and scenario 2, there's differences. It might be something small, but it could be enough of a difference that you might pick a different type of airplane. One of the big differences in, like, where's he at? It's Army. Tojo. In scenario 1, I believe, Tojo should use an HA-34 engine, while scenario 2 uses an HA-35. If you don't note that difference when you're planning out your economy and what engines to build, you might say, hey, I got the Tojo now, and why aren't I building any? Well, you have no engines. You're not building any HA-34 engines. And to recover from that, and I've done that mistake recently. It takes you a month or two in game to recover from that and get enough engines into your production cycle to start turning out these new aircraft. So you want to be careful on that. So you make your chart, you start going through them, and what you want to do, I always put Navy above the Army just because I feel the game is Navy based. Some people might put Army in front of Navy. It doesn't matter which way. Just keep them all separate, because you cannot put Army fighters in the Navy unit and vice versa. You can't put, heavy bombers in a light bomber. You can't mix your aircraft type, or if you're playing, or nationality. God forbid the Allies, they have like 8 different nationalities. What a nightmare. Thank God they don't get to pick and choose what they can build. They just get whatever they get. So basically you're looking, I divide mine up by type and year, especially fighters, because that's really important. And then I go through and I start picking which ones I want. And you want to pay attention to the upgrade paths. The A6M2, unfortunately, upgrades to the Senbaku, which is a fighter bomber. It's kind of crappy. So a 41 plane upgrades to a 44 plane. That is worthless. Where if you go into the M30, you get it in June of 42, it upgrades to the 3A, makes sense, which comes in December of 42. That upgrades to the M5 Zero, which is one of the first zeros you want to go for is the M5C Zero. Not that it's a huge improvement over the rest of the Zeros. It has armor, which it greatly increases the survivability of your aircraft and, to be honest, more importantly, your pilot. Without armor, almost every kill of an airplane, well, it depends. I mean, you're going to lose a pilot. Once you start getting armor, if you lose 10 aircraft, you'll probably lose 2 or 3 pilots, 1 or 2 wounded, and the rest are fine. Without armor, you're probably talking 6 or 7 dead, no wounded, and the rest are fine. So it really helps your men survive the losing their aircraft. Now there's different armor ratings. I think the highest is 3 or 4, and no, it's not on Japan's side. I think like the B-52 or something has like a 4 armor. That's why your little pea shooter 7.7 millimeter guns, they're gonna laugh. You can't bring them down. You just can't. You can't do it. You don't carry enough ammo to bring them down. I think the best Japanese aircraft might be 2, but I'm not even sure about that. Most of them are, like all the fighters, I believe, have 1 point of armor. You can see I have an armor category there, and there they are. As you can see, the early fighters don't have any armor. You're talking 1944 models, really, before you start seeing any kind of armor. Sometimes sometimes like the Jack here in May of 43 gets armor, but in my opinion, the Jack is crap. So I don't ever go with it. By mid 43, I have the 5Cs 0 or better through the research. So you go through and you want to set up everything you want to design. You go through, you pick your planes, like your upgrade paths, whether you have a fighter versus fighter one, a fighter versus bomber one. In the early war, the first 6 months, or basically pretty much in China through like all through 43, you can do some fighter bombers and bomb, strafe Chinese units. Don't try that with American or British, probably not even Australians. the flak, the AA, in the intringent in the units will maul your planes. You'll lose them in the droves. It's not the same. The Allies can do that to you because their planes are tougher and designed for it. The Japanese just really can't. You get and as the Army, you get a couple decent fighter bombers. The Knicks aren't bad. They have some armor early on, but even then, I don't even bother. It's just not worth it. You have to train your pilots up completely different for ground bombing and strafing than you would for aerial combat. So you spend time, you go through, after you make your list, you go through, you compare all your planes. If you're not really sure which one to pick, well, that's easy. Just go back to your tracker, pull the two different aircraft up, and look at them side by side. This makes it really nice. Like, do I want the Claude, or do I want, let me switch this, or do I want a Zero? They both start at the same time, but okay, the Zero is 60 miles an hour faster, a little bit slower on cruise speed. Endurance is a hell of a lot more. Max higher altitude, a little slower climb rate, less maneuverable, about the same durability. Service rating's 1, that's how fast they can repair damage to the planes. The guns on it is 12 versus 4. They're both CV capable. They both carry a centerline mounted 7.7 Type 89 machine gun, 2 of them, and that's all the Claude has. Then the Zero puts on 220 millimeters as well, right on the nose. That's what gives the Zero its killing ability, and so forth. So if you're not sure, just do a direct comparison within Tracker. Once you're done with that, and you have kind of which aircraft you want, then you want to start looking at them by year. Here's my current planning for my Helsing game. I go through them in each category, just like I had in my other spreadsheet. Fighters for carriers, for land, float fighters, night fighters. Notice I don't have any fighter bombers. Come down here, fighter bombers, but it's empty because I don't think none of them are worth it. Then I start putting in the relevant information. When I start getting them, when do I want them to stop building them, and their engine type. So the Zero uses an HA-35. I'm going to keep building the M2 until the 3A arrives. The 3A arrives in December 42. So for the first year, the M2 Zero is my choice. Now, if I R&D something that gets in here faster than the M3A, then of course I'll go to that. And you can see I'm planning for 90 aircraft a month of the Zeros. So I need 90 engines because it's a single engine plane. And you do that for each group. You go through, you plan it not necessarily year by year, but which plane are you using until which plane comes. And like in the naval fighters here, I have 4 different planes I'll be using. Come down here to land, you see I got a lot more. And this is probably not true because I need to change this. I'm not going to go to the 4 Oscar. This is from my last game. Clear that out of there. But I will start with the Nate and build them because I need planes. Early war, you need as many planes as you can build, whether they're kind of obsolete at that point or not. Nate in China for the first year or so still are good planes. Nate in the first couple months of the war against the U.S. and U.K. fighters, they can hold their own. But by then you should be making enough Oscars and Zeros to replace them. The first one I'm going to really build is the Oscar 1C. It's the best Oscar, I feel. Then I'll go to the Tojo line. Tojo is a nice plane. As you see, I want 60 Oscars a month, but I want 150 Tojos a month. Because Tojos have a little more firepower, they can actually bring down some of the bombers. Then after that, I'm staying with the Tojo until Frank arrives. And just for shiggles and gits, I'm gonna use the jet powered Karyu as well. You can come up to I'm going with the Shinden up here. I always like to pick one end game, tier 4, tier 5 plane, just because I want to see what they do. I've never got to use any of them, but I still have them on my list. So I go through all the different types. Fighters, you can see there's 3 or 4 types of just fighters for each one. I write down when I start getting them, when I'm going to phase them out, what engine they use, and how many a month do I want to be able to make. because you'll need this, because that tells you how many engines of that type you need, and you'll need that when you plan your engine production. So then I come down into LBA. There's my Navy. Here's my land. Then dive bombers, torpedo bombers, patrol craft, recon planes, transports, and then of course float planes. The game does not differentiate between the float planes. You can put any float plane on a sub. If you don't have a house rule against it, the best float plane there is the Jake. So don't build Glens, don't build Pete's, don't build any of the Alfs, none of that crap. Build Jakes and replace all the float planes with Jakes. And then eventually the Jake gets upgraded in end of 44 to a little bit better version of the Jake, and then you'll build those. Starting the game, in scenario 2, I have 26 normal aircraft factories and 80 R&D. Now what that means, well, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'm going to go into engines. I get 30 engine factories to start with. I write down what they start building, what the size is, what size I want to move it to, where it's at, and so and what engine engine type I want to change it to. I go through, I do all that, then I come down here and put all the engines. So in this game, I'm going to build 8 different engines. Now there's 14 in the game. There might even be another jet one too, so it might be 15. I don't care. I'm not making those. These are starting pools that I have that come with the game. I will use a lot of these up, making like Nates and the Anns and just planes like that are decent to use early, and then but you don't need to make engines for them, because when you run out, you should have something better. These are roughly how many you start in the pool with. Well, I shouldn't say roughly. These are exactly how many I want per month. You can see that's a lot of engines I want per month. And then here's how I'm going to build that out on my factories. A little R&D information and so forth. So that lets all these engines do is let me build the planes from here. You need to design them both to get it to work. Now, aircraft factories in scenario 2 on version 26B, you start with 26 you get to play with. Now, with realistic R&D on, which most people play with, you cannot change between a production aircraft factory and an R&D aircraft factory. If you turn it off, well then you have X amount of aircraft factories, do whatever you want with it. But most people don't play that way. So of the 26, I go through, same thing, I write down what plane it's producing, what its size is, where it's at, how many are in the pool, and then I go through and put my notes of what I want to do with it. Now, of these 26, a lot of these I will not be using. You can see I have off. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Almost half of the starting aircraft factories I'm going to turn off and leave them alone, because I'm not building all these crappy planes, and there's nothing else I can do with the factories. Then I put down, okay, it starts at size 56. I want 90 of these. I want 90 of these a month. So I come by and make my notes. This is all based on stuff in my air planning and how many aircraft a month I want of each type. And then once I do the ones that are staying for the right aircraft model, then I go through and I decide which ones I'm changing to fill the aircraft that I want that aren't being built. Like the MC-21 Sally transport plane. None of them are being built, but I want to use it, so I have to build them. Like here's my Nates. I'm building as many Nates as I have engines for, and then I'm done. Because you can put them in training groups. There's a lot of useful uses for older aircraft. This one's going to the Babs. This one's going to the Ann. I love the Ann. It's not the best bomber at the game start, but it has a big advantage. It's a one-engine plane, which means it'll operate completely out of a size 2 airfield, where Sally won't. And of course, the Tina and all the rest of them are off. So I put down what it's going to, what size, and any extra notes. And then this is for the game start. As the game progresses, these will change. I may turn some of these on and change them to other aircraft type, convert or upgrade current planes. Like if I go to the 3A0, the M20 will be just upgraded, and so forth. And then aircraft R&D. In scenario 2, I get 80 R&D factories. So you take your list of the aircraft you want in the whole game. So for me, that's tab 1, aircraft planning. And you go through and you decide which ones are the most important. Which ones do I want to try to get as soon as possible? It would be nice to get them all as soon as possible, but realistically, 1 or 2 aircraft R&D factories to a given aircraft type is pointless. It won't increase it any real amount. So you have to concentrate your effort. I prefer, and a lot of people agree with me, and some people disagree, fighters for Japan are the most important. So I found my endgame fighters, the Sam and the Frank. Those get the lion's share. As you can see, each one of those will have 18 factories out of this 80 researching it. I want the Zero because I want the 5C0 because I want armor. I want to stop losing pilots when they could just be not hurt or just wounded due to armor. And the 5C is an upgrade too. So I'm going to put 5 aircraft factories on that. Then you can look down there. I want the Jill, endgame torpedo bomber, Judy, endgame dive bomber, the George, fighter, Irving, a nice night fighter, Shinden, yeah, endgame fighter. There's a 2C Tojo, a good army fighter, the Helen, the best 2-engine bomber Japan's gonna have, the Peggy, which is a 2-engine bomber, army bomber, but carries torpedoes. So you train them up to use torpedo attacks, and army pilots you get more of, so it's good for defending bases. Of course, the Frank. There's my other pie in the sky fighter at the end of the game, and of course I have decided to go with the Francis as my end game naval long range bomber over the Nels, just because the Francis gets some good speed. And then of course I go through my notes. In order to get the 5C0 as fast as possible, you don't turn the factories into 5C0 factories. Because that 5C doesn't come around until 44, sometime in 44. Though by the time these repair up and you get any bonus, it'll be end of 43. I'll have the SAM by then. It's pointless. Luckily, the float fighter roof, the roofies, upgrade to the A6 M5 0, which of course then upgrades through the chain to the 5C. So basically you build 5 of these factories out to size 30 because that's the optimal size for research, and then let them repair. The roofie comes active on I think April 42, so sometime in March these will fill out to size 30, and then I'll bump them up the upgrade path, which doesn't damage anything, to the 5C, and then they start producing 1 point a day per factory. So by itself, these 5 factories will give me 5 points a day. Every 20 days, the arrival date of the 5C0 will come closer by a month. Now, if you have 500 engines that the 5C uses, which is the HA35, that doubles. By April, I should have 500 HA35 engines in my stockpile. So this will be every day. I'll get 10 points towards the 0. So and that's 5 factories. So it's 10 a day. So every 10 days, I advance it a month. So every month in game, 30 days, I advance it 3 months. So in 4 months in the game, so by August of 42, the 0 should have gone from May 44 to May 43. So that's the key to R&D, is getting the engine bonus. Now some of them you can do real easy, like these. Some of them you cannot because you have to research the engine as well. And then of course that's the rest of my notes. You'll need to do all this yourself. Pick which airplanes you want, what the most efficient way to get to those R&Ds are, and then you do them. A quick jump back to the engines. I'll be using 3 engine types that don't exist at the beginning of the game. It's the Mitsubishi HA43, the Nakajima HA45, and the NE Turbojet. All 3 of those have to be researched. The big difference between an engine factory and an aircraft factory, engines, as long as you have 10,000 or more supplies, at the base, they will repair every one of them 1 point a day, whether it's a research engine or not. Aircraft, like research aircraft, it's random whether they repair or not. So engines repair quick. So if you do a size 30 factory for one of these R&D engines, within 30 days it'll be fully repaired as long as you have the supply to feed it. And then it works the same way. Every factory, every day will give you one point. So in 100 days with one factory, it advances it a month. If you have 10 factories going, well, that's every 10 days it advances it a month. It's the same math, just works a little bit different for the engines. And that's pretty much how the aircraft and aircraft R&D works in the game, and how you want to work it. You might say, well, why do you need so many engines, or why do you need so many, 600 francs a month? That's crazy. Well, when you first think about it, it is. But remember, you could lose 40 or 50, 60 francs in one fight. So you need a big stockpile. What I've done in the past is I'll sit these at 600-700 a day. Or not a day, but a month. And so you're building like 10, 20, 18, 19, 20 planes a day. And then once my stockpile gets to be like 2,000, 2,500, 100 aircraft, you can turn these off. You'll save resources, you'll save HI, and so forth. You can turn them off. The nice thing about getting engines pre-built or planes pre-built in the pools, they can't be destroyed. They could lay waste to all of Japan, destroy every factory you have. But anything, like if you have 4,000 francs in the pool, you have 4,000 francs. You can put into units and you have them. They can't be destroyed once they're built. So that's the key to getting a large stockpile of them. And that goes for any plane. As Japan, as long as your heavy industry is positive, you want to be producing planes, especially endgame planes that you'll use at some point. Because, eventually they're going to be bombing the home islands, laying waste to all your industry. And hey, they wiped out all your engine production. Okay, well, I have 1,000 engines in the bank and 4,000 aircraft. So in reality, I have 5,000 aircraft that they can't touch. And that's kind of how the game works. That should be just about everything I wanted to cover on the aircraft and aircraft R&D. Once again, one of the big things about it, you have to do the homework, as I'm calling it, to get all this information. You do it once, and they're not going to change, the scenarios that much, or at least not that often. And now this for scenario 2 on version 26B will be the same for forever. Next time, 5 years from now, I pull up a scenario 2 game, I can pull out the same spreadsheet, and the data won't have changed. So you do it once, and you're good. And that'll be it for this video. Hope you guys are enjoying this series. If you have questions, come over to Jochen Heiden's Discord, or if you want to, I'll post down the forum links to the Matrix forums. You can ask questions on there. I will say, overall, the Discord server is probably a little bit faster, and I'm not sure we have better information, but we're a little more fun. There's less stringent rules on the Discord than on the forums anymore, and there's people on there from all around the world, so you might get answers at 2 in the morning just because people are online, where the forums you won't. But we'll see you for the next video. Hope you guys are enjoying them. If you do, go ahead and give me a like. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. And we'll see you for the next video, which will be going over ships and converting them. We'll see you.